midnight, you won't be coming home.
What's going on, friends? Logan Myerz here for Cinephellas.com. Tonight I'm going back to the 80s, my favorite era for films and music. Tonight I'm going to talk about Prom Night, that was released in 1980, the early 80s, the best time for slashers. That really started the genre, that really kick-started it, Halloween being the first, but in 1980 and on, you saw a lot more slasher movies being put out like every few months, and it just started the genre, and being one of my favorite subgenres of all time. But with Prom Night 1980, this film was directed by Paul Lynch. I haven't seen this film in a long time, since it was probably on VHS. And the movie is currently streaming on Shudder. I can't give enough props to Shudder streaming service. They have been taking up a lot of my time in a good way. I've been watching a lot of old films I haven't seen in a long time, a lot of old horror slasher flicks, and also enjoying The Last Drive-In with Joe Bob Briggs, that wild rascal. So shout out to Shudder. I love you guys. Thanks for putting out great content for us horror movie fans, and taking up a lot of my time during the quarantine and lockdown, and revisiting a lot of classics I haven't seen in a long time. So the setup of the film, we have a bunch of kids. They're playing in this building, and this little girl accidentally dies, and obviously the other four kids are freaking out. They're like, what should we do? We have to tell authorities or cops, and like, no, we can't go to jail, we can't go to prison, we're little kids. So they make this pact not to talk about what happened that day, where this girl accidentally falls to her death. And you know, they fast forward 6 years later with these kids being in high school. And that's pretty much the setup of the film. And I'll say 6 years later, loosely, you know, the time from they're like 10 or 12 years old to like, you know, in high school, 17, 18 years old. You know, they're all like 25, 30, the actors in this movie, which is really funny. You know, they've been doing that forever. But I will say Jamie Lee Curtis, one of my favorite actresses of all time, the Scream Queen herself, plays Kimberly Hammond, and she's the best performance in this movie. This is her second film, the first being Halloween, obviously 1978. So this is her second movie, and this is really how it all jump-started her career with a lot of, you know, slasher horror flicks over the years. And I think I'm going to revisit a lot more Jamie Lee Curtis films. So this movie, she's really great. Kimberly Hammond, she's one of the kids involved in the beginning part of the movie with the girl dying, falling to her death. The setup is them getting ready for prom night. It's a big deal when you're in high school, I guess, but especially back in the 80s. They're all getting ready for this big event. The first hour of the movie is pretty much character development. You know, the beginning of the movie and how it fast forwards to 6 years later. All these teenagers, the four teenagers, where they're at in their lives, and them getting ready for the big night. They can party down, they can drink, they can smoke some pot, and then get sliced and diced. Leading up to prom night, that's when the killing really begins in this film. And this isn't really a gory, you know, cliche horror slasher flick that's just over the top gore and blood, it's splatterfest. They really kind of tone it down a lot in this film, which I was surprised by. I thought there would be a lot more gore in this movie, but the kill scenes are pretty good. We're introduced to the masked killer that's stalking these characters one by one in the high school, which is pretty unbelievable at times, how this person is killing all these teenagers at different parts of the high school. Nobody really notices. There's two mumbling, you know, cops that are hanging out, chaperoning prom night, completely oblivious to what's going on around them. So it's a lot of, you know, unintentional comedic scenes in this film, but there's not a lot of gore or blood. So if you guys are looking for something that's over the top, you know, like most slasher flicks from the 80s, this movie doesn't have a lot of that. But one of the most ridiculous scenes, and probably one of the most ridiculous scenes I've seen in the 80s, I love 80s music. I love, you know, dance sequences, like for some odd reason in, you know, teenage films, especially, everybody's like a choreographed dancer somehow. They're always like dancing in sync. And in this movie, there's this like dance off that goes on and on and on. Forever. It's like disco music, and I just couldn't help but laugh throughout that entire segment, and it felt like it was never going to end, but it was definitely there to make you chuckle, make you laugh, and one of the better parts of the film. With that being said, we had the final battle in the film. You had the final girl herself, Jamie Lee Curtis, taking on this masked assailant and her boyfriend, and we eventually find out who the killer is. And I was very surprised by that. You know, like a lot of films, the person that's a masked killer in slasher flicks, we don't know who it is. And, you know, there's like a lot of twists and turns along the way, and a nice little twist at the end, and we find out who the killer actually is, and I was surprised by that. I had my guess who it was, and I was completely wrong, so I thought that was cool. That caught me off guard, how they ended the film, and the ending, what it really had to do with the beginning of, you know, this little girl accidentally dying and her friends just taking off and just trying to forget about what happened. We find out that there was somebody else there that witnessed the whole thing, and that all comes back to the prom night and the killer. So I thought that was a really cool setup in how we find out who this character is. Another character I forgot about in this film, one of my favorite comedic actors of all time, Leslie Nielsen, playing a really straight, serious role, which we don't see too often in films back in the day. But he plays the father of Jamie Lee Curtis, and being this character in this movie, he was just played it really straight and no laughing, no comedy, just really serious. And he was a really good performance in this movie. Kind of surprised by that too, how good he was in this film playing the father and having to do with this killer at the end of the movie. But overall, I had a really great time at Prom Night. It's been a very long time since I've seen this film, since the VHS days, the early days of the slasher genre that really was a template for many films to follow. And the years later, you know, had all the, you know, cliche horror tropes, the cliche characters. You have a masked killer, a nice little twist, some pretty cool kill scenes. And I really love this movie from start to finish. I like how they started off the film having to do with this really bad accident and this kid and a killer seeking revenge on these group of kids that really shook it off and didn't do the right thing by not going to the authorities. So I thought the setup and the story was really good. Some of the acting was not very great in this film. There's other characters in the film they set up that you don't really give a shit about, and it's a slasher movie. You're not really there for the character development. But overall, I thought directing, the way it was shot, I like the music in this movie, and the standout performances are obviously Jamie Lee Curtis, the Scream Queen herself, and then Leslie Nielsen. And a really great hour-and-a-half slasher movie. If you guys are looking to revisit some old 80s, early 80s slasher, kind of like the early days of this subgenre, definitely watch Prom Night. It's streaming on Shudder right now. It's an hour-and-a-half long, and I think you guys will have a really good time with it. So overall, I'm going to give Prom Night from 1980, directed by Paul Lynch, starring Jamie Lee Curtis and Leslie Nielsen, a 3.5 out of 5 Jamie Lee Curtis hair pieces. So if you guys have seen Prom Night from 1980, what did you like about it? What didn't you like about it? What did you guys think of that remake from the 2000s? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit subscribe. This is Logan Myerz signing out from Prom Night, up here with the Scream Queen herself, Jamie Lee Curtis. Until the next retro review. Cheers!